First of all, I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. I know you're probably all zoomed out already from classes and other things right now, but appreciate you joining us. So this is, as you probably know, a panel of current physical therapy students who are joining us to talk a little bit about their experiences. Sorry for the background noise. My two kids are playing around. This is sponsored by PEK, which is Phi Epsilon Kappa. So that's the honors fraternity for basically all kinesiology, Department of Kinesiology majors. So if you are interested in joining us, and we are a service organization and we would be happy to have any new members. We'll be sending out a call probably in a few weeks, but just to give you a heads up. So just some general housekeeping as we progress. So unless you're part of the panel or someone who is helping facilitate questions, if you could just keep yourself muted until we open it up for questions toward the end. If you do have questions that come up that you want to go ahead and put in the chat, you can also do that as well. And then we can kind of go back to that toward the end of the prepared questions. Sorry. Hey, shh. Okay. Sorry. This is my son, Leo, everyone. Say hi. So first off, I just want to introduce briefly our panel. So these are three former Brockport students. So the first one I'm going to introduce is Emily Lynn. So if Emily, you could give us a wave. So Emily is obviously a graduate from Brockport. She's a graduate from our honors college in 2019. She majored in exercise science, and she is currently doing her DPT program at Arcadia University in Philadelphia. Please don't hit me. Stop. No, sir. Next, we have Allie Nave. So if you could give a wave, Allie. Allie's also a graduate from 2019, and she majored in exercise science with a minor in biology. She's currently in her second year of the physical therapy program at Upstate Medical. And then finally, we have Sophia. So if Sophia, you could give a wave. She is a 2020 graduate of Brockport with a major in X science and minors in biology and dance. And she's currently in her first year PT school at Franklin Pierce University, and that is in Manchester, New Hampshire. Okay. So you have a little background on them. And now we'll kind of start with questions. So the way we're going to do this is I already have some prepared questions, and some of you might have submitted them ahead of time. We'll kind of go through, we'll let the panel respond to each of them. And then again, if we have time at the end, we'll open it up to those in the audience currently for any additional questions. All right, so without further ado, let's start with the first. Okay, so our first question for the panel is, how did you decide what PTU schools you wanted to apply to? So Emily, would you like to respond first?
Sure, I can go ahead.
Picking on you.
All right. So I narrowed down my school selection couple ways. First, kind of based on geography and kind of where I knew I wanted to end up. Places I was willing to move to. And second, kind of looking at the ranking of the PT schools. So kind of within the top ranking, the ones that are kind of well known. I didn't really visit any of them before I applied, but that was, I guess, like further in the process that I like narrowed it down just by visiting and looking into the curriculums more.
Allie, you want to go next?
Sure. To be honest, you probably shouldn't do what I did, because I kind of just picked and choose schools based on requirements and a little bit location. I did a lot of New York schools, but then I started throwing in some random states, which I would go to. But I applied to a lot of schools just so I had them, not knowing what was going to happen with applications and interviews. But when I applied and I chose my schools, I didn't really know which one I wanted to go to at that point. I just kind of threw them all in because I had a general application, so I just put them all in there. But it did cost a lot of money.
So when I first started looking, I had no idea where I wanted to go, and that actually very much stressed me out because I found Brockport early on in high school. So I was like, wow, this is a different experience for me. But I pretty much actually kind of similar to Allie started like just looking at requirements and what I could even apply to based on like GPA and based on the prereqs. Most of the prereqs are similar, but there were some differences. So I kind of had to consider like what I had time to complete and like what I already had done. And then where I am now, Franklin Pierce, I had found, and I actually have some family up in New Hampshire. So I thought it would be nice to come up here. And then I ended up narrowing down based on like location and where I wanted to be. I actually was deciding between where I am now and Drexel, but a bigger city would have stressed me out. So that's how I ended up here.
Thank you. I actually have family in New Hampshire too. I think it's a beautiful state. So kudos for that. Another question that kind of goes along with that is, what do you think are the most important things to look for in a physical therapy school?
I can start with that one. So one of the big things I think is really important is the faculty and like the environment of the department as a whole. The size of the cohort, the type of affiliations they have, that kind of thing. When I came into school, the first 6 months of school was relatively normal in person. I can't imagine handling like the transition to online learning and all of the things that happened with COVID with a less supportive faculty. My department is definitely amazing. I definitely would look for the types of connections you can have with the professors, the size of the cohort that you are comfortable being in, and some of the relationships that you can build within the program.
Yeah, kind of going off what Emily said, I think faculty is definitely a big thing. And you kind of get a chance to meet a lot of them when you go on interviews, and usually they give you a chance after to talk with the faculty. And also class size. I didn't want a huge class. So some of the schools I applied to, their class size was I think 80. And we have at Upstate, we have 40 in our class, which is a good size for me because it's small enough where you get the help that you need, but it's not too small. It's just a good size in the middle, pretty much.
Muted. Okay. As in faculty, I would say just look at like the type of program you think you're going to want. So also like the student support. So what I really like about my program is that all the first year students have a second year mentor. So that was really helpful, especially like in the first couple of weeks of the program, having no idea what we're doing and kind of helping us figure out like what books to get and how to go about like studying all the material. So I'd actually learned about that when I went to visit and really liked that. And I met some of the faculty. And so I think just that supportive environment, which it seems to be the case in so many programs, but you just have to feel it out for yourself because everyone is different. And I think when you go and visit the school or go on an interview, you can kind of really tell if you think you would enjoy that environment or not.
Thank you, guys. And then one more question that kind of aligns with picking a school. Someone wanted to know if you were offered any kind of scholarship or GA position, or if there were any opportunities for that to help maybe fund your education.
I was offered a scholarship where I am now and at Stony Brook University. A lot of PT schools kind of don't offer scholarships, I think. They do often offer GA positions kind of in the second or third year. I'm a GA. I was a GA at the library for a while. Now I'm a GA for some of our Zoom technology and some other, like now that we're in small lab cohorts, I kind of handle some of that as well. So there's definitely opportunities where I am. I definitely think it's not super common for a lot of schools to offer that right off the bat, but yeah, I definitely found it manageable to work a little bit.
I did not have any scholarships, but I will say that once I started, definitely my first year, and I still keep getting emails for department scholarships that people can apply for. So not really going in, but there's definitely opportunities throughout, even if you don't get a scholarship right off the bat. Going through the curriculum, there's lots of scholarship opportunities.
Yeah, I didn't have any scholarships going in, although the program I was deciding between, Drexel University, is the one program that I've heard of that actually offers a huge amount of scholarships. And they really stress that. So, I mean, if that's something you're looking for, definitely look into Drexel because they do have a lot of opportunities. But once you're there, there are scholarships through the American Physical Therapy Association, which have certain specific requirements, but based on what year you're in and how many classes you've completed and things like that, they do have a few scholarships through there. And similar to Allie, like my school is emailing me about like alumni association scholarships and things like that. So small little things that you can apply to once you're there. And you can apply to be a second year GA, which I love that you're a GA, Emily. Our GAs are very helpful, so that's great. So yeah, things like that.
Okay, great. I always recommend if you're ever going to go to graduate school, try and find funding, get somebody to pay for it, right? So our next questions concern the application process. So could you just kind of give us an overview for students, for instance, who are maybe a little bit worried or overwhelmed by the application process for PT school? Just kind of give us a general idea on the process that you went through when you were applying.
Sophia, I don't know if you want to start. You're kind of closest to it.
Yeah, I can start. I most recently did this. So I think the link was actually just posted in the chat, but you want to go to the Physical Therapy Centralized Application Service. So it's the acronym is PTCAS, and that has everything that you'll need. So it has all of the list of current programs, all the list of accredited programs, which is something important to look for. There are a few schools out there that are in the process of going through accreditation. And there are students at that school, but you can't get your PT license until you graduate from an accredited program. So that's just something to look for in case something goes wrong with the accreditation process. Know that you would be taking a risk if you go to one of those programs. But you have to start an application on PTCAS, and then they make it really easy for you. They outline everything you have to do. So from there, on that website, you basically just add all the schools you're interested in. You do have to take the GRE, and then from there, it'll be listed under the school whether you need a supplemental application for that program, or if you just answer the general questions. So all the questions on PTCAS for each school are very similar. You have to go in and put in all of your classes. You have to manually type in all of your classes in addition to sending your transcripts, which is quite time consuming, but it's not difficult. And then you just answer the essay questions and pay a lot of application fees. And that's basically it. The PTCAS should tell you if the school has an additional application. So if it does, there'll be a link to that school's website. And then on that school's website, it'll explain the process of the additional application, which is normally just another essay and another fee. So
Yeah, she pretty much just summed up the whole thing. The other thing I would say too is if you don't do too hot on the GREs like me, there are some schools that you don't have to send your GRE scores to. So if you go to that website, it usually tells you what schools need them and what schools don't.
All right, that's great. That's an awesome overview. Sorry if you hear crashing in a minute. My son is actively throwing things in the room next to me. So this question I think is more relevant for Allie because she's at SUNY Upstate right now. But somebody wanted to know if there were any prerequisites for that program that were not covered in the exercise science program.
There were. It's pretty much Upstate had similar prereqs from all the schools I applied to. So I had to take Bio 1 and Bio 2. I had to take 2 physics. I think I had to take 2 chems. And then I think I needed a math class. And then I think there was an exercise science class, but you already have that. But I think that those were the big ones, the bio, the chem, and the physics that I didn't take that aren't in the exercise science curriculum that I had to take.
Did you need a psych class?
Yes, you're right, I did. I needed 2 psych classes, actually. One of them, I think one of them had to be a developmental psych. I don't know if that's a thing still, but I took abnormal and developmental psych.
Relating
Just
to the
chime
psych,
in for you guys, Allie, it's been, I guess, maybe a year or two since you've been at Brockport, and the memory fades a little bit, but believe it or not, you did actually have to take chemistry for exercise science. So that was kind of part of the deal, you know, that wasn't really an extra above and beyond thing. But the Bio 1 and 2 certainly was an extra above and beyond thing. And then the physics kind of runs that gray line in the sense that, you know, the physics is an elective within exercise science. So you can choose to take that or you can choose to take something else. And obviously, a lot of students who are interested in PT, like yourself, probably chose to take the physics 1 and 2 and then kind of use those as electives and the such. So just to kind of add a little clarity for those of you guys who are current students at Brockport and thinking about heading down this path.
so with the psych class that Allie mentioned, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Okay. Some programs require 1 and some programs require 2 psych classes. So that was actually a big determining factor for me when I was looking at programs because I didn't have time to take 2 psych classes and I didn't want to add another summer class because I'd already taken so many. So I only took 1 psych class. My program only required 1. But a lot of them, I would say more than half do require 2 psych classes. So that definitely limited my options, but I still found plenty of programs that I liked and wanted to apply to. But if you have the time to take 2, it definitely would be a good idea. But psychology was not my favorite subject and I really did not want to take a second. So if you're like me and don't want to do 2 psychology classes, then there are plenty of programs where you can get away. I only took the intro psych class and was fine with it. So.
Oh man, you're hurting my feelings. My undergrad was in psychology.
Oh no.
No, it's totally fine. I get it. I'm curious though, did you notice when there was a second psychology course, was it similar to what Allie experienced where it might have been a developmental one or was it just any?
Most of them are either a child or a developmental psych.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Good
my
for-
program
good for the.
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're good.
My program also only required 1, and that same with Sophia. That was a determining factor for the schools I ended up applying to at the end, just because I didn't have time to take a second one. But yeah, most of the ones I saw were either developmental or child.
All right, great. Good to know for our audience there about that. Now we want to move on to your actual experience in your current program. So first question is, what has your experience in the program been like so far? So we know a couple of you have been in for at least a year now. And I think Sophia, you just kind of started more recently, but just give our audience a sense of what it's actually like being in PT school. Whoever wants to start first.
I mean, I guess I can start because Emily and Allie can elaborate. But my school is on a term schedule, so that's actually just been different because they have 4 terms, 4 terms a year. The whole program is 10 terms. So I'm actually in finals week right now. My second term ends this Friday. So that's been very different just because it's a different structure. It's not a semester structure. So that definitely took time getting used to. But it's just a lot of content right off the bat. But what's really nice is that all of the classes relate back to each other and you can really apply the content to what you're doing. So things I was studying just before this that finally clicked, I was like, oh my gosh, that relates to all these things. And it's very exciting when that happens. But in the beginning, you're going to be doing a lot of anatomy, a lot of kinesiology. And then you start to go into more like systems and physiology classes. And what's nice about the anatomy and kinesiology classes, you think, okay, I've taken that at Brockport. Yes, but the classes are different in that you go to lab for anatomy and kines, and it's related to how you can help an injury or like why you would need to know that content to be able to like fix someone's shoulder, fix someone's wrist or something like that. So it's all really applicable, which I really appreciate. And the hands-on portion is really nice because it really helps the learning. But it's definitely the first year is a lot of content and a lot of time spent studying.
I agree. First year, they throw a lot of stuff at you and it's super busy. There's a lot of stuff you have to do, and it's kind of balancing between all your different classes. But I love it at Upstate because they take time to do labs and they'll teach you content and then they'll do labs and then they'll teach you more stuff. And once you get through the first year, it kind of calms down a little bit as far as content goes, and it's more of applying the stuff. They give you a lot more case studies. You're doing a lot more projects, more group work, not as much staring at the books all day. And I think they send us to our first clinicals last fall, like 2020. So that was good. So we got all the information and then we went to clinic, and now we're back in class again. So we're kind of just building on everything from the first year and just adding more stuff onto it.
So my program's actually kind of different. It's structured pretty differently, which is kind of why I chose it actually. So my program is actually 2 semesters shorter than most DPT programs. So I didn't start in the summer right after I graduated, like a lot of, like I know like Allie and Sophia did. I started in the fall, and mine is a total of 2.5 years. So I'm done next January. So the way they structure it, we have 20 units, and each unit is structured around type of patient case, and it kind of builds on everything. We have a second pass to, typically 2 passes at all the materials. So we've had, like currently we're in our second pass at stroke neuro rehab. Last time we had it was a year ago. So you have kind of 2 passes at all of the orthopedic joints, 2 passes at a couple of the acute care type pieces of the content. I am in the last year of the program as it is structured currently. They kind of switched it. They brought the gross anatomy in-house. So unlike, I know Allie and Sophia who started with gross anatomy, mine was my second summer. The rationale for doing the anatomy later was that you kind of have a better understanding of like what you're looking for when you're doing it. So they're trying not to like overload you with looking at all of the gross anatomy right off the bat, that you have more of a functional concept of it first. But they're actually now integrating it into the course. So if you're applying for next year, for the year after, or for a couple of years, it will be a little bit different than that. They kind of integrate it into the units. So basically mine is structured similarly to Allie's in the sense that I had a lot of my content. I had clinical in the fall for 2 months. I was in San Francisco, and then back in class, and I have classes through May. So I'm done with my like coursework in May. And I graduated the same year as Allie, and then I just have a 6-month last like terminal internship clinical. So I have my placement for that, and I'll just be basically working full time starting from June to December, and then that's my program.
Great. Thank you guys very much for that. We have a couple more specific questions about your program. So the first one is, how difficult is grad school compared to courses that you took at Brockport? So would ever like to start with that one first?
I think it's not, it is the difficulty level, but more the volume of work rather than level of difficulty. That's what's difficult to adjust to. I think you're all used to studying, you're all used to like the level that you're at now, and the classes that you're taking now are difficult for the level that you're at. So I think when you progress to grad school, you're gonna be learning the content the same way you would in a class at Brockport. It's just more detailed. Therefore, there's so much more volume of content that you have to know. So I think that's actually the main, at least for me, that was the main factor to get used to, is that it's not like it was difficult. It's just what we covered in about a month and a half in kinesiology at Brockport, we covered in a week and a half in my program now. So I think at the beginning, that was what I was like, wow, like, okay, slow down. Like we didn't get to this for a really long time at Brockport. But it's because you're getting a doctorate degree in 2.5 to 3 years. So they have to go quickly. And I think getting used to staying on top of the volume of work and how you can best study for that, so that you really can learn it, is what was the most challenging part for me.
Yeah, I agree. I would say it's definitely just more information. I don't think the tests, as far as test goes, it's not that much harder than what you get in undergrad. The other thing too is I feel like in undergrad, I always had a class or two I could kind of put on the back burner and procrastinate. But in the program here, you kind of have to prioritize all of your classes. So that's something you just got to kind of adjust to and kind of get a schedule. And then, but just organizing, as far as test goes, it's not that much harder. I will say the exercise science people in my program almost have an advantage over the bio majors in the program, because we have the exercise science, we have the kinesiology, and a lot of the bio majors in my program didn't have that. So when we got to those classes, they were totally lost, whereas we at least have a background in it. So some of it we kind of already knew.
I would say for me, the hardest thing actually really wasn't necessarily the volume, probably just the way my program is structured, but more the depth of the content, the way that we looked at everything. So we didn't divide our courses into like a whole class on kinesiology or a whole class on anatomy. We kind of cover all of the aspects, the intervention, the examination, the biomedical, and then the kind of psychosocial, around one type of a like case, I guess, one type of an injury or one type of a focus, and all of that content. So it's very like all of our classes are kind of all over the place within one unit, but they all relate to the one kind of topic. So I think the biggest thing for me was getting used to the depth of the questions, the depth of critical thinking, clinical reasoning. I think that was the only course that I know Dr. Shearer is on here. The only course I can kind of equate it to from undergrad was cardiac rehab with Dr. Shearer, in the way that the questions kind of don't ask you exactly what you learned. They really apply it to cases. It really makes you think about how things work, how things integrate, and how everything kind of affects everything that you're doing. Yeah.
I think the way they ask questions, yeah, like Emily just said, is really, really big. And that's what the first couple of exams, if people didn't do as well as they had hoped, then going over the exams, they realized I knew that content. It's because you can't just, like for anatomy, you can't just memorize all of the bones, all of the muscles, all of the insertions and origins. Like you have to know why that's the case and you have to be able to apply it. So they won't just ask a direct question. They'll ask like something like, this patient came in with this injury and is having trouble doing these motions, and they won't be direct about it. You'll have to be like, okay, like what do you think the injury was? Why are they having trouble doing a certain motion? Like what muscles flex the shoulder? What nerve goes through there? Like why are they having trouble with that? And you really have to relate it all back. So it just kind of requires a lot of thinking rather than like regurgitation of what you might have put on a flashcard.
Great, thank you guys. And then a question that kind of goes along with it, I think some of you alluded to this, but what kind of strategies do you use to handle the course load that you're taking right now?
The biggest strategy I kind of learned was using OneNote and organizing my notes that way. I found that I had to kind of structure my my lecture notes a little bit differently than I did in undergrad, particularly like we were just talking about in the way that the content isn't just regurgitated, the way that, certain pieces of the content, you're going to need to use in your career. It's not just material that you have to learn and forget. And so I kind of have a whole OneNote notebook of each unit I've had, of each kind of week of the material. And it kind of just all ties back to that. We have a lot of like case labs and application type content that I kind of had to learn how to take notes on. I always found it difficult to take notes like during a lab. So I ended up getting kind of like a tablet that I could like write electronic notes on. And that was kind of the biggest realization for me and what I needed to do to kind of be successful in labs.
I am more of a Quizlet person at this point. After we have lectures, I try to make Quizlets because I feel like that's the most efficient way for me to go through this stuff. And that way I have them for the future when I need them. And I kind of just go through those. And then once I know I have that stuff, then I go over to the cases they give us or the other assignments they give us that we have to actually apply the information. So then I try to see if what I learned from that I can actually apply. Because if I try to just jump right into the cases and I don't know the information, then I get all flustered and I don't know what's going on.
So you'll find that everyone has a different study strategy because I'm going to tell you something different than Allie and Emily even just told you. So what's really important, I would say the first few weeks of school is really determining what works for you, because once I figured out my study strategy, it's gotten so much better. But I actually find that handwriting notes works best for me. So during class, I don't handwrite my notes because it just takes too long. I can't get enough information down that way. But I'll write notes directly into the slides of the PowerPoints during lectures or during labs. But then when I go home and I go to study, I sometimes make flashcards if it's not as heavy of a unit, but I find that when I go through the slides and I actually rewrite the notes into my notebook, like not typing, actually just handwriting, that actually works well for me. And I'll talk through the information out loud. And once I write it down and once I talk about it, then I can be actually confident that I know it.
I really like that you guys have all different strategies that you use. I think that helps. Like you said, Sophia, everybody kind of has their own different style. It's really about finding what works for you. And honestly, we're like two peas in a pod, Sophia, with your strategies. That's exactly what I did in grad school, and it worked really well for me. But Emily and Allie's ideas sound awesome too. And again, I think it just really, really depends. So thank you for sharing those ideas. Next question concerns what you wish you had known prior to going to PT school, right? It's kind of one of those, you don't know what you don't know. So if you could kind of share maybe some things that you didn't think about in undergrad when you were applying for school that you feel like would have been really beneficial.
I think I didn't really realize how many specialties there were within PT until I got into it. Coming in, I had a little bit of experience in pediatrics, and that was kind of what got me into PT school in the first place. I had kind of shadowed in a couple general outpatient ortho clinics. There are so many specialties within the field. Honestly, one of the best things I could recommend is kind of taking a look at all the different sections on the APTA, the American Physical Therapy Association website. You can just see how many different specialties there are and all these different areas and avenues you can take into setting and practice and age population. And there are so many different little areas. And I think it wouldn't have changed anything for me necessarily, but I think that's something that I almost wish I had known sooner, I guess.
I agree with Emily. Also, I would say it's really not as bad as it seems, because I know in undergrad, everyone, it gets all hyped up and like it's really hard. And yeah, it's really hard, but it's definitely doable. And I guess that's just not something I was ready for. I thought I was going to go to PT school and it was going to be the hardest thing of my life. And it's definitely hard, but it's doable. And everyone else in your class is in the same spot too. So you all just kind of work together. It's not a competition and everyone just can kind of collaborate.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is that it's not a competition anymore. You all made it. You all got to PT school. So everyone wants to see each other succeed, like the professors and the students. So how Allie before was saying that she makes Quizlets to study. I don't normally do that, but like my program is so collaborative that we have a group Quizlet. So there are some people that fully study with their Quizlets and they'll make them and they'll post them to the group. So if it's like the night before an exam and I want a little extra review, I'll go in and I'll look at Quizlets that other people made. And I didn't make them. They don't care. Everyone just shares all of their notes with each other. If people are struggling, like other peers having the same things to study and having the same amount of stuff to do, we'll go out of their way to help explain it to you, because like everyone wants to see each other succeed, which is really great. And it's really motivational to help, like if you're struggling, to help you get through. But like Allie said, like it is possible, and it's not like this thing that's going to be the hardest thing you ever do. You know, it's school. You've been doing school for so long. It's just you, for grad school, just need a little bit more determination. It's not really something you can kind of like just do because you think you might like it. I would say before going in, like know your why, and like know why you want to do it and what you're motivated about. That's also a big interview question that schools are probably going to ask. Like they want to know why you're doing this. And so if you know the reason that you're putting yourself through this, you see yourself in a clinic, in a hospital in the future, then I think that that's really going to motivate you. And it'll help you get through, because it just requires a little extra determination, a little extra study time. You can't just look at material the night before the exam. That's simply not going to work, but like it is possible. You just have to be determined, really.
All right, it's great advice. I'm sure it's reassuring to some people to know, one, it's doable, like Allie was saying, and two, it sounds like you all have very supportive programs, which I think is really, really important. I know that was really beneficial to me in grad school to have that cohort of people that was always there to kind of lift you up. So that's really good to know. Our last kind of prepared question at this point is just, what advice do you have for current undergraduate students who are interested in going to PT school? And related to that is, do you have any advice as far as preparing for a DPT program as well? So what's your best pieces of advice for current undergraduate students?
Start the application early. But once you get going, if you do a little bit each day, it's not bad, but it can be time consuming, especially when you're trying to do it when you're taking classes too, like in the fall. So I think they open it in July. I would try to start it in July because then you will have less to do when you get to school in the fall.
I would say, and I just saw a question in the chat about observation hours. Yes, many require lots of observation hours. That's my recommendation, is observe in as many different settings as you can. I know it's kind of probably difficult right now with COVID and all the restrictions, but as many different types of populations and settings and types of clinicians that you can observe, the better. And I think my other big piece of advice is maybe not so much in the preparing process, but if you end up in PT school and once you start, how important it is to keep everything organized and kind of create outlines and guides for yourself from day one. I know I wish I could have told myself that, day one, that I should have kept and started making cheat sheets of all the different things that we learned that I would end up needing in the clinic. That's absolutely something that I wish I could go back and tell myself. So definitely, keep yourself organized and remember that you're going to need all that information kind of in the future. So.
And keep your ACSM books because I use mine all the time.
Yes, I do use mine all the time as well. And also one of my classes next term, I just saw the book list. We need the one of the ECG books we used in cardiac rehab. So I literally just called my mom yesterday and said, hey, can you actually mail me this? I need it. So yeah, those books you will use again. But I was lucky actually to have Emily as a friend at Brockport who told me some of these things last year. So what she just said about being organized and making cheat sheets for yourself, I started doing, and it's incredibly helpful because I have these really neat organized notes of different pathologies and the signs and symptoms and the special tests that you use. And those are things I'm going to be able to keep organized in a folder. Like she said, when you go out onto clinic, you have all the information right there if you need to look back at something. So that's really nice because that's me studying, but also knowing that it's me preparing for later on when I might need to look back at something. Something else, I guess, in terms of preparing while you're still at Brockport, content wise, there's really in terms of making it easier for yourself content wise, there's really not much you can do. It's not something to stress about over the summer, or my program didn't start over the summer. So I did have that summer, but whether your program starts in June or your program starts in August, take the summer. There are people who might tell you oh, start studying over the summer, make it easier for yourself. Honestly, I didn't, because I was I want to enjoy myself and relax a little bit before going full force into this program, which I have heard others say as well. In terms of while you're still at Brockport, I would say your classes matter. You're learning the things you're learning for a reason. Don't just study for an exam and forget it the next day, because the content you're seeing in some of the exercise science classes and prerequisite classes really will come back. And if you have an understanding of it and don't totally forget the information after you learn it, it will really help you in the long run. So if you can figure out study strategies for yourself now that help you retain the information rather than just memorize it for an exam, that will be really helpful, because then you'll have that content in your brain and you'll also have a study strategy for yourself that you know works going into the program rather than having to take time to figure that out. So maybe think about your hardest class that you're taking right now and whatever works for you studying for that class, really figure that out now. And then you can carry those strategies with you.
Great. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate your responses to the questions so far. So we do have a little bit of time. We were planning on ending around 7:30. So those are all the questions that I have prepared and that were submitted ahead of time. I want to open it up now to anybody who is currently in the audience who would like to ask any additional questions. You can either unmute yourself or you can put it in the chat. I know we've had a few in there already that look like they've been answered. So thank you, Mr. Sandler, for that. So if anybody else has any other questions, please feel free to ask at this point.
I have a question.
Let me just thank the three of you guys for spending your time, with our current students. It's terrific to see all three of you. I guess at this point, Emily and Allie, you guys have been in programs for almost 2 years. Sophia, you've been in a program for not quite a year yet. So I'm kind of curious if your area of focus within the PT world is starting to take shape for you. Emily, you kind of mentioned that there's a million different pathways that you could head down within the field of PT. And so I'm curious if you're starting to see some direction as to where each of you would see yourselves within that PT world.
Yeah, I actually, I kind of did my first kind of full-time clinical was 8 weeks in general outpatient ortho. And I really enjoyed that. But I definitely had kind of an inclination that I wanted to specialize a little bit more. My upcoming terminal clinical, I'm going to be spending 6 months in a specialized pelvic health avenue. So I'm taking a pelvic health certification through Herman Wallace, and I'm going to be kind of working in that population with what used to be called women's health is now called just pelvic health in general. And working with a lot of people with not just the external work, but a lot of internal work. And I've really enjoyed the kind of bridge between the psychosocial and the physiology kind of that. So.
My area of interest is currently going in no direction. At this point, I'm still open to everything. I did my first clinic in outpatient ortho and I loved it there. I really like the outpatient setting. I haven't had a whole lot of experience in acute care, but that's where I'm going this summer. So I'll see how that goes. And then maybe from there, I might be able to narrow it down a little bit. But as of right now, I'm pretty much open to everything.
I don't have a huge direction because I haven't been in the clinic yet. I'll be starting my first part-time clinical in a couple weeks, and then I'll have my first full-time this upcoming fall, like the other two had. But I think I'm interested in pediatrics. None of my observation hours was in pediatrics, but I learned, which I didn't know was a specialty. There are actually neonatal certified therapists that you specifically work in the NICU with preterm babies. And I actually think I would be very interested in that. It's like a specialist certification. I probably wouldn't get that until a little bit down the road though, because it is so specialized. I would probably work in pediatrics for a little while first if I do like that, but who knows, I could do a pediatric clinical and end up not liking it. So we'll see. But yeah, as of now, that's what I'm interested in.
All right. Any other questions? I believe maybe Kevin had one.
Yes, I have a question. How was your transition from Brockport to graduate school? Did you have help or did you do everything by yourself, basically?
So I think Sophia mentioned this a little bit, that she had a second year or has a second year buddy. My program works similarly. So I had someone kind of reaching out even a few months before school started who was in the year above me and just, hey, if you have any questions, I'm in the program. So I know I definitely reached out to her for things like what textbooks to get, what, her study style was, kind of getting a sense of how I didn't really understand the schedule at first. And so kind of definitely had help with that. She helped a lot leading up to the first couple practicals when, didn't really know what to expect. So that was a really nice resource. And now it's really nice to be on the other side of that and be a second year buddy for the first years. So that I definitely didn't feel like I was alone. I also have my program, we have advisors. So there's like my program is 60 students. So we have five students per like faculty member. And so I definitely was able to reach out to her, and she kind of checked in with us every couple months to make sure we were doing well and we didn't have any questions, and we were, they would kind of look at our first couple exam scores, make sure we were doing okay. Like everyone's been saying before, like they really want you to succeed and to do well, and they absolutely are there to support you. So
I think what's great is that the help is there if you need it, and it's really like, how much support are you going to need coming in versus not, which it's not a bad or good thing either way. I think it's just important to know that like the support and the help is there. And like, if you need extra, like, the first week I reached out to my advisor and kind of talked to her a little bit. My advisor emails us like a couple times a term, just checking in, asking how our studying's going, like preparing for exams. She'll ask us like, what's your plan for the exam? So like, if you didn't have a study plan, all of a sudden your advisor is like, hey, what's your study plan? You're like, oh, okay, thanks. Yeah, I should help. If you don't have a plan, that's fine. Like they're there to meet with you. And what was really great about my program is the student support. So like I have a second year mentor. And honestly, just all of them, unfortunately, because of COVID restrictions, we don't really know the second year class that well. My program doesn't we occupy like one floor of a building, so they don't have the first and second years in the building at the same time to try to limit the number of people. So in person, I don't actually know them that well, but like before our first exam back in September, like all the second years were emailing us and posting in the Facebook group, like first years have their first exam tomorrow, good luck. And like everyone knew it, everyone was there and supportive, and they're like, we did this last year, like you guys will get through it. So I think what is really nice is actually the student support, because I think that that's something that you don't find as much in undergrad, just because everyone's kind of on their own path, and people have different majors and different end goals, but what's nice is that everyone here has the same end goal, so everyone wants to help you.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add to that. We basically have the same thing at Upstate. The second years would reach out to us. We have advisors that we have to meet with every semester. And last year, when I was at first year, we could actually be with the second years at the same time. So the second years actually did a lot of, they would try to get us to, we would have kickball games, we would have wiffle ball games, and they would just do a lot to try to keep us involved. And like they said, we're all in the same boat. And so everyone just kind of supports each other.
All right, we have time for maybe one, possibly two questions, depending on responses. So does anybody else from the audience have a question?
I have a question for Emily.
yeah.
As a freshman, and I went to Brockport as a freshman, right? What was your mindset as a freshman at Brockport?
Like in terms of like if I knew I was going to PT school or not, is that what you kind of are getting at?
Yes. And overall academically and that.
I guess academically, I mean, Allie can attest to this. I was pretty focused kind of right off the bat. I was definitely came in knowing I was going to PT school. That was my kind of plan all along. And so I started my, first semester, freshman year, I took physics, and I knew I was kind of going there. So my mindset was kind of towards that the whole time. Yeah, I don't know if that answers what you were asking.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask a question.
Sure, go ahead.
In terms of diversity, how diverse would you say your program is? Like, how diverse are your classes?
Do you mean in terms of like all types of diversity, like racially, so like all types, or?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that just depends on the program and the area that you're in. So, I mean, I'm in Southern New Hampshire right now. So actually going to New Hampshire from New York is a lot less diverse than I was used to growing up. And I grew up outside of New York City. So that was where I am now, is actually a bit like less diverse because I'm kind of more in the country. But that really just depends on your program. If you go somewhere in the middle of the city, it's probably going to be a lot more diverse. In terms of within each class, normally, I mean, I can't speak for the other programs, but most, I believe, at least what mine does, you move through in a cohort. So it's not like half my program is in one class while the other half is in another. Like all 60 of us sit in lecture, all 60 of us move to lab, and we all have the same classes every day. So within classes, it's the same. It's whatever your program is. So I would say really it kind of just depends on where your program is. But I think regardless of diversity, like the support is there no matter what. So if that's something that's important to you, I mean, I would ask that when you go out to interviews and stuff like that. There might be a little bit of data on that in the PT CAS. But I would say it would just depend on the location. But regardless of that fact, the support is going to be there no matter what for everyone. So
the diversity overall, according to APTA and the statistics that there are within the physical therapy profession, is not a very diverse field, unfortunately. There are a lot of organizations and a lot of people trying to encourage that and increase that, especially in today's climate. I know I'm part of, at my program, something we just started last year, part of a PTMLA coalition. So we're looking at ways to increase diversity, ways to increase awareness, exposure, kind of bring in speakers, and ways to encourage that not only within our PT program, but within the PT profession as a whole, and trying to attract a more diverse population. So it's absolutely something that there is room for, and there are people who care about, and there are people willing to start things. And it's awesome to kind of be able to start pro bono clinics and start these things, for sure.
I agree. I would say at Upstate, the diversity, I think, is pretty similar to what it's like at Brockport. But like they said, there's always resources. Everyone's willing to help and support you for whatever you need in the program.
Thank you.
All right, great question. Fortunately, we're out of time at this point. I know we're all busy, so I wanted to kind of keep this at an hour. If anybody in the audience does still have some questions, please feel free to email me, and I would be happy to maybe relay those on to our panel and get responses, and I can get back to you. So if you have any burning question, please let me know. I don't want you to feel like you were left out of this, okay? But I want to thank our guest panel again. Thank you guys so much, Emily, Allie, and Sophia. You were great for taking time out of your busy lives right now and being able to share your wisdom with our students here. And thank you all for coming and joining us. I really appreciate it. Just as an aside, this panel was being recorded. Hopefully you guys saw that on the screen. We'll be sending out a link to other KISP majors, just for anybody who wasn't able to join us today. Okay, so thank you guys very much. I really appreciate your time, and I hope you have a good rest of your evening.